Hey everyone. So today I have my good friend Andrew Powell here. Andrew is the owner of Pacific Crest Home Inspections, and we're going to talk you through why you need a home inspection, number one, and number two, some things to consider when getting a home inspection. So Andrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into the importance of a home inspection.
Perfect. All right. Well, like Sarah said, I'm Andrew Powell. I'm the owner of Pacific Crest Home Inspections. I have been in the home inspection industry for about 8 years now, and just went off on my own this last year and started this company for myself. Been staying very busy with it, but basically what I wanted to do as far as a home inspector is I take a lot of pride in my work, and I wanted to make sure that every home inspection that I do, I'm bringing kind of a personalized approach to it. So I don't want to be like a cookie cutter company where I just come in, do my job, get out and get on with my life. This is a big investment for any home buyer coming in, and I wanted to try to make it as personalized as possible. So although we look at every house the same exact way, every transaction is a little different, and different buyers have different needs, which is why as part of my introduction to the home inspection, I'm always conversing with the client, figuring out, do they have any particular points of concern or areas that they're really worried about with the home? So that way I can address those on a case-by-case basis versus just going on with my day. So,
So based on that, Andrew, then why would you recommend getting a home inspection? I mean, I know you and I have done several together, and we've looked at a lot of different properties, and some of them, at a glance, they're, especially like the ones that have been renovated or flipped. I mean, they look perfect, right? So can you kind of walk us through why you are a home inspector and what
absolutely.
you look for?
So for me, the reason I got started in this industry, I actually got started in this when I experienced my first home inspection for my wife and I. The home inspection process I was kind of the same way, very glossy eyed, didn't really know what to expect or, what questions to ask. It's really hard, especially as a first time home buyer, to know what is important. So what I quickly realized that was important was not necessarily what you can see, but what you can't see. For instance, I'm not super savvy with cars. I can change my own oil, I can rotate my own tires, but beyond that, I probably wouldn't want to dismantle my transmission and put it back together. So
Right.
same thing for a home inspector. You want somebody that obviously knows what they're doing, has experience in the field, because you don't know what you don't know. So when I go into a house and I'm looking at a rehab, a lot of times what you're seeing on the interior is, clean, everything's brand new. There's not really a whole lot to pick on, but even with rehabs I see, or remodeled homes, I see the same 15 issues on every single remodel I go into.
What are some of those issues that are pretty common?
Oh, for sure. So there's a whole list of things that are really common. So like I always start my inspection in the kitchen. So a lot of times we'll find issues with appliances that aren't installed quite correctly. So like your range will be missing an anti-tip bracket, which is, a $15 part, but the nuts and bolts of it is that bracket's designed to prevent the oven from rocking forward if a kid climbs up in front of it. So it's kind of an important deal. You could look at things like the dishwasher, and the dishwasher will be missing an air gap, which is that little R2D2 looking canister that sits next to the faucet and doesn't really appear to do anything. But a lot of times in rehabs, they'll plumb the dishwasher to drain directly into the disposal. The issue with that is then you have no prevention from wastewater backflowing into the dishwasher if you do get a blockage in the sink drain, which happens a lot. So little things like that, but that's what we see on the interior of the house. But really for a rehab or a house that has undergone major renovation, the areas that we're primarily paying attention to are the areas that you don't really see. So areas like your attic space, your crawl space, the roof, the crawl space underneath the home if the house is on a raised foundation. So those tend to be the areas where we find those quote unquote big ticket items when we're looking at homes that have been remodeled, which there's a big difference between a home that's been remodeled and a home that's in original condition. So every home it's like I said, this is a very dynamic industry. You always want to make sure that you're matching your skill set to the type of home that you're inspecting. So there's such a big difference there.
So Andrew, on that note, I'm going to share my screen to one of the inspections that you and I did together. And I really want you to kind of walk people through, what's important and what's not and, kind of how the report is classified. And how do I
Okay.
know what to freak out about? You've got 110 items inspected, and you've got some that are attention items. Like, how do I know what's important and what's not? And we can kind of scale through parts of this if that's helpful. But,
Perfect.
I just wanted them to kind of get an idea.
Awesome. So one of the things that I always recommend looking for when you're looking at hiring a home inspector is obviously you want to make sure, accreditation and education, but you also want to look for some things that are a little bit more recent developments to the industry. So for instance, right now we're looking at a digital inspection report. I highly recommend finding an inspection company that uses some sort of digital software, because this creates a inspection report that is not only informative, but it's actually useful and intuitive. You don't have to be a general contractor to understand what the heck the home inspector is talking about. So this report right here is one of mine. This is actually a really clean inspection report as far as inspections go, but you can see that
normal.
this is a very abnormal property. But normally there's 4 categories. You have the green, which is items inspected. You have blue, which is observation items, which are like age-related wear and tear. So things to be mindful of, but not necessarily anything that needs immediate attention. Then you have the orange items, which are the attention items. That's kind of the meat and potatoes of the inspection. That's where all a majority of the concerns are going to be annotated. And then there's usually a 4th category in red called safety concerns, which are pretty self-explanatory. Now, this particular home does not have any safety concerns. So again, it's a very clean property.
I was looking for one that had a bunch of safety concerns, but that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. So the report, you can see where the cursor is focused. You have basically 3 categories. You have the full report, the summary, and just the safety concerns. So that allows you to kind of filter the report to meet your needs. And that's where kind of the intuitive software comes into play. There's still a lot of home inspectors out there that are pushing out, carbon copy inspection reports, which don't really give you as much information. And more importantly, I'm a home inspector. I look at reports every day of the week. Some reports that I come across, I have a heck of a time understanding them. So I can only imagine the confusion that causes homeowners and agents.
And from an agent perspective, sometimes we're looking at 3 or 4 properties in a week. And so to get a report that, has something like, here's video that I can click on and actually see what you're talking about is really helpful, especially when I'm sending this to a listing agent and saying, hey, this is what the problem is. So I think that is super helpful.
Yeah, and especially at a time right now where, not everyone is able to attend the home inspection with all this stuff going on right now. The videos make it a lot easier for me to illustrate an issue that doesn't necessarily translate into text. And again, you can't really put a video into a carbon copy inspection report. So that's why, like I said, I recommend digital software. So you can see as we're going through the report, the items are actually color coded to those color combinations we were talking about earlier. So for instance, like 4.6.1, you'll see the water heater is missing what's called a sediment trap. This is another one of those issues that I call out on probably 90% of the homes that I look into. But it's one of those things that would be required if the water heater was going to go through a replacement, but not necessarily required to retrofit. So that's why that's listed as a blue item, an observation item. Versus if we go to the left, you see that we're having slow drains at the sink in the hall bathroom. That's something that you want to get corrected, because you don't want to move into the house and instantly be surprised with a blockage in the drain that you have to hire a plumber for. So that's why that's an orange item or an attention item.
So is it your recommendation that the home buyer ask for all of the orange items to be fixed, or are there some things that are more pressing than others? I mean, I know as an agent, depending on the market and depending on the high demand of the home, some sellers are going to say, we're not going to fix anything. So if I'm a home buyer and I get a report with 18 items on it, I mean, how do I read this report?
Well, a lot of that comes down to the presentation of the home inspector. Most home inspectors are going to do a summary with you at the end of the inspection and kind of run you through the concerns. So as a home inspector, I'm really not supposed to say grade repairs. As far as the home inspection report is concerned, we have to recommend that all items be corrected. But we're also realistic. We know that there is no such thing as a perfect home. So a lot of these issues that we come across, we can kind of verbalize what our main concerns are for the house, because there is a substantial difference between normal wear and tear or homeowner maintenance items and an actual repair that's necessary. So this is actually a good illustration here. So if we look at 4.42 and 4.51 side by side, they're both orange items, they're both attention items. So in theory, they're in the same level of severity. Now, if we look on the right, we see that there's slow drains in the hall bathroom sink. Now, 90% of the time, this is going to be debris in the drain, and that can be fixed with, you know, a simple, you can start with Drano. Otherwise, you might have a plumber that would need to come in and remove some debris or blockage in the sink drain or in the trap. Now, if we look to the item on the left where the master tub spout is leaking, so that's a bigger concern for me, because that tub spout, every time you're running the shower, it's leaking from the base. And very often that can allow water to track the fitting beyond the enclosure wall and cause water damage in areas that you can't see as a normal homeowner. So you really don't see that issue until it's manifested as a larger deficiency. So so the item on the left would be a higher priority than the item on the right. But again, that's where you want to kind of keep in perspective that when you get a home inspection report, again, there's no such thing as a perfect house. You don't need to fix every single item on the home inspection report right away. You really want to focus your attention on the things that are a big concern for you. You know, your health and safety items, your active plumbing leaks or roof leaks or water intrusion issues. Mostly the things that can cost a lot of money. So it's not really, in my opinion, it's not really realistic to go through and ask for every item on the home inspection report to get fixed, because you might get a lot of kickback from the seller, because the seller might say, you know, the water heater doesn't have a sediment trap. It's not required for that construction period. I'm not going to retrofit that. And you might end up creating some contention between the seller and yourself for all of the items, rather than if you're asking for the realistic items, you know, your big ticket or your main concern items. And just accept that, you know, the home is older, and you're going to have some homeowner maintenance that comes as part of that as well.
So what about something like this, Andrew? Like, this is a blue item, so it's an observed item, but it says like the electrical panel is full. As a buyer, that's kind of concerning. So does that mean that, you know, if I upgrade my washer, I'm going to have an issue? Or is this something that I shouldn't be concerned about? Like, that's kind of the thing that I think most home buyers are kind of unsure of.
And so this is, like you said, this is an observation item. So those age-related wear and tear things. So a good perspective for this is, you know, when older homes were built, say back in the 1960s or 1970s, think about how few electric appliances your average homeowner had. Now, when these homes were built way back then, you know, 100 amp service would have been a lot of electrical power for the house. But by today's building standards, you know, everyone has multiple TVs, and you have all these fancy kitchen appliances, and electric cars are coming into play, and solar panels, and people are a lot more electrically demanding today than they were when, you know, older homes were built. So a panel being full doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have room for expansion, because there's a lot of options out there. You can reallocate power. You can add in breakers that allow you to take advantage of multiple breaker spots on one terminal. So there's options out there, but the nuts and bolts of it is the panel would be a little undersized for what you would want today. And I imagine in another, you know, if everything keeps going the direction it's going, in another 50 years, home inspectors are going to be saying that a 200 amp panel is undersized for a single family house. So that's just kind of the nature of the beast. As demand grows, obviously, things like your electrical system are going to have a hard time keeping up with that. But just like any component in your house, you know, your water heater is good for, you know, 10 to 15 years. Your electrical panel gets a lot more time out of that. But at some point in time, you might have to upgrade just to comply with the demands of what you have in your house.
So now we're getting into interiors, and I think that this is something that we go back and forth with, you know, cosmetic versus a safety hazard or something that is needed. Windows come into that, and I know that we see this a lot in new builds too. You know, we walk into a new build and everything looks to be completely good to go because the cosmetic interior is perfect. What is your thought on getting home inspections for new builds and kind of addressing that cosmetic versus, you know, something that is more serious?
Well, that's kind of where you hit the transition between different types of inspections. So if I'm looking at a 1940s craftsman style home, that is very, very different from looking to, you know, a brand new 2020 build. obviously 2020, everything is, well, if it's done correctly, everything is going to be built in compliance with today's building standards. And so an inspection report on a new build tends to be a lot more, for lack of a better term, nitpicky. You're looking at a lot more of the cosmetic side of things because those are still covered underneath the builder warranty. And, touch up paint or damage to the cabinet, you're buying a brand new house.
Yeah, you'd expect it to be perfect.
Yeah, I would be upset if I bought a brand new house and I found, cosmetic deficiencies in the home because nobody's ever lived in the thing before. So,
yeah, exactly.
So when it comes to new builds, the reports do tend to be a lot more on the aesthetic or the cosmetic side of things versus the functionality side of things, because from a functionality standpoint, everything is brand new. Now, that being said, I also always crack the joke that if contractors did what they were supposed to do all the time, home inspectors would be out of jobs. So
true.
When I'm going into a new construction build, again, this is where you kind of justify having a home inspection, because a home inspector looks at houses all day, every day. And you walk into a brand new construction house and, you're glossy eyed, the house looks beautiful. There's no visual deficiencies there, but I can't tell you how many times I've gone into new construction builds and found, major plumbing leaks, or I did a home warranty inspection the other day. So the builder warranty expires at the 1-year mark. I went into a house that was 11 months old, and they've been living in the house for 11 months with no insulation in the attic space. And so you can only imagine the utility bills that get driven up because there's no insulation in the attic space. And the home was completely signed off, good to go. So that's why, even on new construction homes, I always recommend having a home inspection fixed, because, although the builder is responsible to come in and correct that deficiency underneath the warranty, they still have to eat the utility bills that they've been paying for the last 11 months. So that's where I kind of justify home inspections on new construction builds, because it allows someone to come in and really double check the work that's being done, which is ultimately what the home inspector is there to do, is to double check the condition of the property, looking at the areas that you yourself may not be familiar with or able to really identify.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew, can you walk us through some of your tools that you use for the home inspection? I mean, is it just visual? Is it just your eyes? What do you use specifically to help you diagnose some of these issues?
For sure. Yeah. So as a home inspector, again, there's varying degrees of quality or efficiency in home inspections. This is another area where I recommend, if you're shopping around for a home inspector, to make sure that they're using the latest and greatest tools and equipment. A home inspector should always be carrying things like an outlet tester and things like, flashlight, digital camera, if they're producing digital reports. Those are kind of the default tools that every inspector should have. Now, there's also specialty equipment that I highly recommend verifying that a home inspector has. The primary one being forward-looking infrared cameras or thermal imaging cameras. So basically what a thermal imaging camera is it's a thermometer that displays a thermal image, and that can allow the home inspector to identify things that may exist even beyond the wall surface without causing any sort of physical damage or destructive investigation. So it doesn't see, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So it gives you x-ray vision, essentially.
Well, that is a common misconception. The camera doesn't actually peer through the material, but what it sees is basically a thermal image, and it displays that back to me, or sees temperature and then displays that back to me as a thermal image. So where the camera really excels is finding things like moisture issues, so roof and plumbing leaks or water intrusion. It can find gaps in insulation or lack thereof, overheated electrical circuits, and a whole gamut of other things. But the camera by itself is a diagnostic tool. So if I'm looking for something like moisture, which is primarily what I would be looking for, I also need a device called a moisture meter. A moisture meter, it allows me to verify presence of saturation, because thermal imaging cameras, if you're not experienced and you don't know what you're doing with them, can definitely point you in the wrong direction. So that's where a lot of home inspectors do not implement thermal imaging, because they're not educated on how to use it properly. In my opinion, it's an invaluable tool if you get adequate training and you have all the correct tools to really take advantage of the camera. But I couldn't imagine doing a home inspection without one at this point. I'd probably find something on every single home inspection that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, whether it's something small like a dimmer switch that's running a little hotter than it's supposed to be, all the way up to, 1960s homes or prior that don't have insulation in the exterior walls, or, right now we've been getting a lot of rain, and I think I've found a roof leak on every other house I've looked at for the last 2 weeks. So
yeah, I mean, I know when we did our home inspection with you, it actually helped us to see that there was a leak under the refrigerator for a water line that had been disconnected at some point, but it was
Yep.
still dripping slowly, and we would have never found it if we wouldn't have done that camera. So I think it's invaluable, and I agree. I've worked with several home inspectors, and I think that the ones with the cool gadgets and tools, there's a reason that they use them. And maybe we should transition into that. What are some of the things to consider when we're choosing a home inspector?
Yeah, so we've kind of been tiptoeing around that point the entire conversation. The first thing that I always recommend is, make sure you're using a home inspector that is using modern technology, modern equipment. And we're talking from like start to finish. Having the ability to schedule online, having a good online presence, web page, social media, if they're into that, that's awesome. Me, myself, like I get a lot of business off of things like Facebook and Instagram, just because I like posting educational content on there. And I think people really appreciate that. So having a home inspector that uses a good online presence is usually where I start. And honestly, with most businesses, that's usually how I start to identify credibility in a company. What's their online presence? I don't necessarily want to jump on and be the first customer for somebody.
The trial, the guinea pig, right?
Exactly.
The first review.
So after that, it really gets into things like the amenities that they offer. Digital inspection reports are a must, in my opinion. So you want to be able to have access to your report from any mobile device. How often do you get on your computer anymore? Everyone does everything on their cell phone. So I want that to be as intuitive as possible.
Well, and I think a point too that gets missed, Andrew, in that is that when I go to sell my home, I want that report so that I can show how I bought the home, the changes I've made over time, and different things to pass on to the new buyers. So I think it's an investment moving forward into the integrity of the home and what you as the owner has done over time.
I agree. Yeah. And your home inspection is, for all intents and purposes, it is a snapshot in time. You're looking at the house as it was the day of the inspection. And like we were talking about earlier, not everything in the home inspection needs to be fixed right away. A lot of this stuff is going to be, honey-do list stuff. It's your weekend projects that you're going to start punching out.
Your quarantine projects.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Your shelter-in-place projects. So these allow you to basically have a list of all the things that you need to, be mindful of and start taking care of over time. And imagine you have an inspection report that has 100 items that need to be fixed over a 4-year lifespan in a house. You can whittle that down next to nothing. And if you're keeping up with proper maintenance of the home, your next home inspection report can be exponentially cleaner than the one you purchased, and allows you to spread that repair process or that repair cost over a period of time of your ownership. But so going back to selecting a home inspector, after making sure that they offer those things, I always recommend finding a home inspector that has the ability to sign inspection agreements and pay online, just in case you can't attend the inspection. And then obviously inquire about what type of tools and equipment are, what their process is. I personally encourage clients to tag along with me during inspections, which that gives you the opportunity to really learn about what you're purchasing. Obviously right now, like we were talking about, it's a little weird where I'm requesting that no one attend the inspection just for everyone's safety. But even so, I'm still doing everything I can to make sure that you feel involved in your transaction. I'm FaceTiming people at the end of the inspection. I'm doing stuff like this where we're having a conversation about what to expect and what to do. And then I have follow-up with, once the inspection report is produced, I want to walk you through the inspection report, because you get a report that has, say, 100 annotations on it, like we were talking about. That's a very intimidating number, especially as a first-time home buyer. But the big part of it is perspective. You want to make sure that that you're aware that not everything in the inspection report has to be fixed right this second. So that's where the one-on-one interaction with the home inspection really comes into play.
And also, Andrew, for the viewers out there, I think it's important to note too that you're kind of like a general practitioner, right? Like, so
Absolutely.
If I go to the doctor and I have some symptoms, the doctor is going to diagnose me, and then he may send me to a specialist. So you may say, hey, we've got some slow drainage. We may recommend that you go and get a pipe inspection. or you know what, something in the HVAC system doesn't seem to be firing correctly. You may want to have an AC contractor come look at that, or an HVAC contractor come look at that. So you're kind of the general diagnosis, and then from there we can get more specialized people, foundation or roof or whatever that may be. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's a very common misconception with home inspection. You know, people go on HGTV and they see Homes on Homes or something like that, where he goes into the house, does an inspection, and then tears the whole thing apart to rebuild. That's definitely not the way that the home inspection industry operates. So, like you were saying, our job is kind of like the general practitioner. So I go through and I find as much wrong with the house as I possibly can to give you a point of direction to know who you need to have in terms of specialists come out during your contingency period to help you identify, you know, the extent of an issue, or more importantly, the cost associated with that issue. So, for instance, you know, I can't see a sewer line because it's all buried. So if I'm going into a house that is in a construction period where maybe you have something like cast iron, it's always recommended to have a plumber scope the main sewer line. Now that's an additional cost, and obviously those things do add up. But if I paid $200 to have a camera or a plumber come out and camera my sewer line, and he comes across something, everything is kind of an investment. Your home inspection is an investment. I can tell you, I've never gone into a house and found less cost issues than what the fee of the home inspection was. So, you know, if I go into a house and I identify 15 torn window screens, you know, that the cost of replacing those window screens is already higher than the home inspection fee is. So that the home inspection is definitely the biggest investment in the initial stages of your real estate transaction, because it gives you an idea of where you need to focus your attention and really what your big concerns are. If you move into a house and, you know, the roof has 6 months of life left on it, that's something that you want to be aware of before you officially take possession and you're the one writing a check to fix it.
Yeah, and Andrew, kind of on that, when we talk about investing in the initial stages of your home purchase, how much should an inspection cost?
Well, there again, that's a varying degree. You can shop around, and you know, realistically, there's home inspectors out there that are $200 and $250. If you're paying $250, you're probably getting a $250 product. Most home inspection fees, on average, usually hover around the $450, $500 mark for a single family house around 2,000 square feet. Now, the fee of the home inspection varies based on the square footage of the home and the amenities of the home. So if you have a lot of add-ons like a granny flat or a studio, a pool, those are things that are outside the scope of the typical home inspection and usually can be evaluated for an add-on fee. But yeah, most home inspection fees range in like the $400, $500 mark for an average single family house.
I will say, in my experience, I've had clients that have shopped the home inspection. You know, I made my recommendations on who I would hire. As you know, you did my house, so you always come highly recommended. And they went with a cheaper inspector. And those are also some of the people that have called me who had full pipes break under their home and, you know, had to have everything replaced, $15,000 within the first 6 months. So I'm a firm believer of you get what you pay for. And I'd rather know all of the issues up front. I bought my house knowing all of the issues it had because I thought it was a good investment, and it's proven to be so. But I wanted the knowledge up front. And I think that that's an important takeaway in this is get everything that you can up front.
Yeah. And when you're shopping around for home inspectors, like I said, you want to make sure that they're using all the state-of-the-art equipment, make sure that they have the tools to do the job. And, you know, ask your home inspector what their process is. You know, I see home inspectors that don't enter attic spaces because they're confined spaces, or don't go underneath houses because they're restricted. Although technically that's within most home inspectors' standards of practice. Like I said, if you're truly following the standards of practice to a T, you're kind of doing your client a bit of a disservice, because there's areas that, you know, I go underneath houses and find that cracked sewer line where, you know, the $250 guy isn't making enough money to justify crawling to the extremities of the crawl space. So
under our house, you found that half of ours were suspended and half were in the dirt.
Yeah. So, and that's the same thing. You know, me personally, I'm a home inspector. I hire a home inspection company to inspect my own house. I don't inspect my own property. And a lot of that's to prevent, you know, conflict of interest. But, you know, I want I want an unbiased opinion going into the house. And, me purchasing my own home, I might be a bit of a biased opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us and going through kind of the inspection process, what to look for, what to expect. One more time, tell everyone where they can find you. You always come highly recommended from my clients, but Pacific Crest Home Inspections. And thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. So again, Andrew Powell, Pacific Crest Home Inspections. You can visit me online at www.pacificcresthomeinspections.com. From there, you can find links to my Instagram, my Facebook, Twitter. I'm launching a TikTok right now, all sorts of fun stuff. So check it out on social media. And you can also give me a call. Any questions? I don't care if I'm involved in the transaction or not. I answer questions about other home inspection reports all the time. Shoot me a call, 858-386-3204. Be happy to help out.
Thanks, Andrew. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Be safe, guys. Have a good week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.